Hey, so as I speaking into this video, there is nationwide protests across the United States. I've heard of a big one in Atlanta, but there's other protests going on about the current very volatile situation between the police and let's just call it what it is, the black community. Um, I have come across a source from the Guardian newspaper in the UK that shed some interesting statistics. Now, they are calling this project The Counted, and they go on to explain that this is research that they have done based on crowdsourcing information. The reason being is that there is no, and this surprised me, there is no single federal source of information, data on the number of people killed by the police. Actually, I shouldn't say surprised because it's a similar situation in the UK. We have something of an ambiguity in figures, perhaps to less an extent because we're a smaller country. I think that's a very dubious situation. It seems to me that if there was a single federal way of counting this, it would be a lot easier to gauge the information. So the information I'm going to talk about is not concrete. I should emphasize that it is not concrete, but as the Guardian says, it is the most thorough source for information that there currently is. They're basing this on a number of sources, on crowdsourcing, on a variety of information that they are getting. So I'm going to just read out the statistics that they have because I think this is very important. This is all the people killed in the last year, or at least the nearest year that they have got available, which I believe is 2015. Um, and these are the statistics. And I'm going to put a link to this website because it makes interesting reading, and I think it's very important. So this is a proportion of American citizens killed by demographic, by ethnic group, and it is a proportion per million people. It's very important to emphasize per million people. Top of the list is actually Native Americans, which is 3.4 per million people. That is followed by Black Americans, 3.25 per million people. Hispanic and Latino, 1.59 per million people. White, 1.41 per million people. And Asian and Pacific Islander, 0.56 per million people. So, in terms of proportion, the most impacted group is actually Native Americans. Black Americans are second in this category. Now, in terms of the actual figures, and it has to be borne in mind that there's obviously different populations for the demographics. 13 Native Americans have been shot dead by the police. 137 Black Americans, 88 Hispanic or Latino Americans, 279 White Americans, and 10 Asian or Pacific Islander Americans. So, in the highest figure is actually White Americans, followed by Black Americans, Hispanic, Native American, and then Pacific Islander and Asian American. There's also 42 others, so that's people, I guess, who have mixed identity and so on. Um, so clearly, by those statistics, there's actually more white Americans being killed by the police than any other group. However, the highest proportion is actually Native Americans. So, if this is indeed the most thorough information that is available, um, then it actually casts a little bit of a question mark over the notion that Black Americans are being victimized more than any other group. And I know that's controversial. I'm not trying to offend anyone with that, but I'm going to put a link to the website, make of it what you will. I will say some things that I think are very, very important. I think where there is trends that needs to be discussed, where it seems to be a trend where, for example, a larger number of black men are being killed. But I also think it is important to look at a case by case basis. And it's very, very hard for people not to be emotionally moved by what's going on, especially when a lot of these things are happening on camera. It's brutalizing society, which is why there's these very emotive responses. but I do think people need to look at the case by case, on a case by case basis, because not every case is the same. Um, I mean, it's hard not to be moved when you see like what's happened to people like Eric Garner, but those statistics are as they are. I will also say that I'm not a huge fan of Black Lives Matter. The reason being, I think they're inconsistent. If the if the approach here is really about Black Lives Matter, why are they not vocalizing the problem of, frankly, gang violence that is also killing a lot of Black Americans? So, I know that's a controversial point to make, but if there is really to be discussion on this, and I know I'm an outsider, I'm making this as a suggestion to American citizens. If there really is to be an honest dialogue on this, people need to think rationally and they need to look at the cold hard facts. They also need to be honest. I believe that police collectively need to acknowledge that there is police corruption, there are racist cops, and there should not be double standards when police kill someone in unjustified circumstances. And it's not good enough going on desk duty, they need to be arrested. That's the first point. However, and this will be a controversial point coming from a white guy, but I'm going to say it, the black community also needs to be honest that there is a problem in inner city areas with black gangs. Yes, you get white gangs, yes, you get Hispanic gangs, but there is a specific problem in cities like Chicago and Detroit with black gangs and black on black violence. And if you are in denial about that, then this problem is never going to be solved because it creates an atmosphere where you have police who feel that who are militarized. They fear black men. Let's face it. Um, and it's a never-ending problem of trust. Black men fear the police fear black men. And this isn't even taking into account the fact that there are black police officers out there um, who mostly back their brothers in blue, not surprisingly. So I really think if bridges are to be built, I mean, I said it's important to look at a case by case example. Looking at Philemon Castile earlier, I said that it seemed to be unjustified. Now, that's an example of how a developing story can sometimes lead people to reach conclusions that they don't entirely know about. I've just seen another article that is alleging that this guy, Philemon Castile, was not as innocent as it may first seem. Apparently, he had numerous police cautions and arrests, albeit for more minor offences, and that's certainly not a reason for the man to be dead. But I do sometimes think that there is a tendency for Black Lives Matter to present each and every case as an innocent black man being killed. And is that really the whole picture? I'm not sure that it is. So there has to be honesty from both sides, because if there isn't, this is not going to be solved. I would make a comparison with British Muslims. There is a perception in the UK from large segments of the Muslim community that the government and the police have victimized them. But there is also too much denial that there are extremist Muslims in society who have Islamist thinking. We've just had a sectarian killing. A guy went all the way from Bradford, which is in northern England, to Glasgow, which is in Scotland, about 300 miles away, to kill another Muslim simply because he had wished his neighbours a happy Easter. And he done it because he said the guy disrespected Muhammad. Now, the reason I'm making that example is because there is a problem in this country with Islamist thinking within the Muslim community, and it may be a minority, but it's a problem. Now, black leaders need to be honest about the problem of black crime, just as police chiefs need to be honest about the problem of police abusing their power. Unless there is honesty on both sides, I don't see this problem being resolved. Um, and I don't think that Black Lives Matter has done a great deal to, they will say they've got no other choice. The problem is if you alienate the wider public by doing things like blocking highways when nurses are trying to get to work, if you make out that only black people are being killed, which is factually wrong, it's not the case, it's not going to solve the problem. It's not going to build trust. It's not going to build bridges. And I'm trying to be as neutral as possible here because the police also have responsibility. And someone in my last video made the point that there is double standards about the 5 police officers killed in Dallas. I would agree with that. I think that there is definitely, among too many white Americans, a casual sort of idea or notion that, oh, they're cops, so their lives matter more. And I think that's wrong. But, I've read those statistics, and the Guardian this may not be, a perfect source, but it is the most thorough source that is available. And they've based that on crowdsourcing and on numerous media data that has been available. So it's not perfect, but it is the best source that seems to be available. Um, so again, those statistics, this is per million people. Native Americans 3.4, Black Americans 3.25, Hispanic and Latino Americans 1.59, White Americans 1.41, Asian and Pacific Americans 0.56. So that still shows that the ratio of Black Americans is more than twice white Americans, but doesn't mean that white Americans aren't being killed by the police, because they are. 279 people, in fact. It's very, very important that people know this information, because I feel what's happening now is people are responding emotionally, and whilst that's understandable, it will not solve the problems. So I hope, as an outsider, if I'm contributing anything, it will be some sort of rational thinking on this. Um, and any information I get wrong, I hold myself fully responsible. With what's happening in Dallas, that's still a developing story, so I don't want to talk too much about the details of that. In fact, I'm going to go down and see the news update at 4 a.m. here in the UK, and these protests are ongoing. Um, don't shoot me down for being the messenger. I'm trying to be neutral here, and I'm definitely, definitely not trying to offend anyone. Um, if you're an African American, please just think about what I'm saying. Don't respond emotionally. If well, this white guy doesn't know about black suffering or something. Um, I can't pretend I know directly how people feel, but you do have to look at the facts and not just respond emotionally. That is important. Um, so, in my opinion, black community leaders have just as much responsibility as police chiefs. And if they're saying things like all cops are racist and it's only black people being killed, that is a lie. It is just not factually accurate. So those are the facts. I will put a link to this website and take from it what you will, but it is the most thorough source of information that is available out there. Like I said, there's not a single federal source of information, which is very problematic.